Hello, and welcome to the Empowering Law Firm Leaders podcast, where we'll be talking to experts across the legal sector to discover the mindsets, behaviours, skills, and digital tools that are needed to run a successful modern law firm. I'm Amy Bruce, host and head of marketing at Osprey Approach. And today I'm joined by the author of Getting On, Making Work Work, and co-author of Business Development for Women Lawyers, and managing director of Inside Out Image, which helps lawyers and leaders excel at professional relationships. Joanna Gaudoin, welcome, Joanna. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me, Amy. Great to talk to you again.
Absolute pleasure. So today we'll be discussing how law firms can accelerate their business development skills to drive organic growth. We'll cover the business development skills lawyers and leaders need to drive organic growth. We'll discuss the common business development challenges firms face and how to overcome them, and the impact of the other business areas on winning new clients and how to network effectively. So Joanna joined us previously on our Build Better Habits series to discuss how to build an effective workplace culture that empowers employees. But today, we'll be discussing how to excel at business relationships to win new clients. So first, if you've not heard from Joanna before, if you don't mind telling us a little bit about your background and your experience that's led you to where you are today.
Sure, and it's a long and winding path that I would never have foreseen. I graduated from uni a long time ago now, let's say over a couple of decades. And I thought I'd go into some corporate and I'd probably work my way up through it over several years, maybe move on. I suppose the model of I saw certainly my dad do. It's been nothing like that, but it's been great. So out of uni, I'd done a year abroad because I did a language degree and management degree. So I'd worked anyway for a year. But I did get onto a grad scheme with a large American company, and I worked in a couple of markets with them, focused on brand marketing. So not very glamorous, but tissues, toilet roll, that sort of stuff. That's Kimberly-Clark. And then I wanted to broaden out what I was doing. So I went and moved into consultancy. Everyone told me, oh, you'll never get into consultancy after 3 years in marketing, but I did, albeit quite specialised consultancy in terms of marketing metrics. So looking at what marketing delivers, what you should spend money on. And worked on that for a while, not the modelling itself, but the client side, managing the clients, making sure we really understood their business so that the insights we were giving them back from the data could fit into their strategy and they could do something with them rather than just being a load of numbers. Because I'd had experienced that at Kimberly-Clark a little bit. I'd been given a load of data from agencies and then, well, that's nice. What does this mean for my business? What do I do with it? So did that. And then for one reason or another, I ended up working commercial due diligence. So mergers and acquisitions and helping PE houses who wanted to look at whether they should buy certain companies, whether that was a good acquisition for them or not. So looking into their customer bases, how strong their relationships are. Were they a good option, essentially? Did they get great feedback in the market? So it was very boring. I absolutely hated it. It was too desk-based, too researchy. I ended up putting on 2 stone in weight from eating cake to cheer up my day. Ended up, yeah, easily done in an office, I think. And then with the recession, I had to look sad when they made me redundant. But I moved back into consultancy in the marketing space for a while and worked on some interesting brands there, particularly for SAB Miller. Don't exist anymore, but they used to own Peroni. And then from there, I just thought, you know what? I'm not really using all my skills. I don't love what I'm doing. I've got to do something different. But the problem was you always went to recruiters, and I think danger is it still happens now, and they just want to put you in a neat box. They're not trying to help you find the great next step for your career. That's not their job. So you invariably end up doing a similar role again. So the short version is I went and worked with a career transition coach to help me work out what to do next. And she really helped me think about what I wanted my days to look like, what my values were, what I thought I was really good at. And the summary from that was I wanted to help people develop and grow. There was more to work than just the technical skills. They're really important, but what else do we bring to the workplace? And I wanted every day to be different. And so I went and retrained in personal impact and related skills in autumn 2011. So my business is 13 years old now, as we record this pretty much this month. And from there, it's just grown and changed. And I certainly do a lot of work on personal impact still, because it's the foundation of how we engage with other people. But now what I do is I help people think about the skills they need for every different professional scenario that they come across, and the different stakeholders they've got: internal, external clients, other contacts, and the relationships they need really to get what they want to out of working life and progress their careers, but importantly to help their organisation, firm move forward. So that is all the work I do. So I do loads of speaking, I run training, and I work with individual clients as well.
Yeah, absolutely. What a wealth of experience. And actually, I think a great way to start this podcast, in that thinking about what you want your day to look like and how you can actually retrain. Just because you've done something for so long doesn't mean that you have to stick with that. And actually, I think that's a great, my next question is about characteristics of leaders. I think that's a great characteristic, that you're able to be self-aware enough to go, this isn't where I want to be. Actually, my skill sets lie somewhere else. And yeah, you're absolutely probably the most people person I've ever come across, and you're very well suited for where you are in the sector, and you've got so much experience that I absolutely want to dive into now. So if listeners only have this 5 minutes to stick around, and they can't stick around to the end, which I hope they do, I'd love to just jump into some quick takeaways. So after working with thousands of lawyers and just thousands of professionals, what would you say are your top 3 essential characteristics of being a successful leader, and particularly in a law firm?
I think if we're thinking about leaders as in the most senior leaders, the managing partner, or sometimes these days there's a CEO or different model for a law firm, but the people overseeing the entire law firm, let's put it that way, I think they need a vision for the firm. Who do we want to be? Who do we want to serve in the market? And how are we going to stand out? That's super important, because if you haven't got that set up and importantly communicated to the rest of your firm, no one really knows how they're going out to the market, how to present themselves and your firm. So I think that's number one. And secondly, the common phrase is get the right people on the bus. But essentially recruit the right people and really think about who are the right people. Yes, good lawyers is an obvious point, but actually there are a lot of good lawyers out there, making sure you're recruiting the lawyers that are right to help you deliver against your vision. They've got, even if you don't think they've got the skills right now, you can see they're developable. You can develop them. I'm not sure if that's even a word, developable. Just invented it now. But that you do need to then invest in developing those people. It's not a case of just get them in for their good law qualifications and, let them sit there. They do need developing to make the most of their careers and for your firm. So that's the second one. And I'd say the third one is be absolutely passionate about the focus on your clients. Because if you haven't got clients that buy into you, that are loyal to you, that refer other people and feel really happy about your service, you haven't got a great basis for a business. And that can be more and more challenging as a firm grows. To keep the same great client service, even if it was great in the beginning, that's hard as you grow and get more people to keep the same way of doing things. Of course, everyone needs to interpret that for themselves, but the same sort of culture and feel you want to create for your clients throughout that. And I've seen a lot of firms not do that very well. I've got one particular firm in mind, and I know the person who runs that firm, but I can see that it's almost got a bit out of control, because as it's grown, that some of the people, and this is from some personal experience, aren't delivering the best service that they could. I'm not sure if the leader of that firm knows about it, but that's what you've got to keep a really tight grip on, and that's tough to do, really tough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure we'll touch on that as we go through this conversation, as we talk about how we can organically grow and the best ways to do that. And one of those things is about looking at your existing customer service, and your existing clients will be influential on how you win those new clients. And if you've not, like you said, if you've not got those ones who are your ambassadors, who you're, flying the flag for you, it's going to be super hard to grow on that and develop on that. And I love your first 2 points as well about hiring the right people and a vision. And I think all that very nicely comes under culture. And I know we've spoke about that in loads of other episodes before. Developing, building, even knowing what your culture is definitely a place to start. You want to know who you're supposed to be, who you want to be, and how you can build that team around you, and make sure that they align with those outside of the hard skills of actually being a lawyer. But do they fit with your ethos? Do they fit with your vision? So
Yeah.
Yeah,
And if
some
people
great
aren't
top tips.
aligned, you don't know where to start, really. How are you showing up in the marketplace? So
Yeah, so
important.
and it's hard to change once you've gone down a path that you're unsure on. Bringing that back round is a hell of a lot harder than starting in a place that you're super clear on. So
Mm.
yeah, do the work now and it'll pay off in the
Yeah.
future.
Absolutely, and
Um,
it's a baseline. Yeah, I sometimes have firms say to me, "Oh, we just need some business development skills. Can you just come in and do that?" And I said, "Well, I can, but you're not going to get people doing business development activities if they don't feel confident about what they're saying about your firm and themselves and the work they're doing. That needs to be super clear. It's not, you can't just have a sticking plaster. For firms that are very established, that's fine. They've got a very clear idea. So the larger firms, but certainly for more of the mid-sized ones, which are what I'm focusing on now to try and help them put in the foundations. I'm making it really clear it is a journey, and you've got to spend the time to put these foundations in. Otherwise, it really is a sticking plaster. Or a great analogy I heard recently, it's like eating McDonald's. It takes away your hunger in that moment, ticks a box, but it's not giving any nutritional value. And it's the same if we just come in and give people some great networking skills, but they don't know what they're actually saying about themselves or the firm, or which kind of clients they're looking for. So they don't even
mm.
know which events they should be going for. It just doesn't match up. So it is really important to think about that, as much as it makes it a longer and seemingly more painful journey, but it will pay off in the future.
Yeah, I agree. Because it having those foundations actually gives you the answers to a lot of the questions you might have. If you know who you're looking for and know what you want to achieve, actually it's easier to say yes to the things you need and no to the things you don't.
Absolutely. And one of the big challenges I think firms have with business development, and they say, well, we want to grow, and that might be growing revenue, might be growing people, it might be both, certainly growing profit. Um, but they don't know where to start. It's what do we start with? And so if you haven't got that strategy as a baseline, that's going to give you no clue where to start. So that's why it's so important.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, in the LexisNexis 2024 Bellwether report, it stated that 63% of SME firms are planning to grow organically over the next 5 years. It's huge. And 67% of leaders apparently said that attracting new business is a significant challenge for them. So everybody wants to grow, but essentially nobody knows where to start. So if we start there and look at what are the common business development issues or challenges that you see out in the legal sector?
Yeah, so it's don't know where to start. Probably another one is linked to that very much is how do we spend time and money? And the danger is you just start going, oh, we'll do a bit of this, we'll do a bit of that. Don't really give it a proper go, as in thought through and give it enough time. So you feel like none of it works. So that there's sort of related points, really. The other one that's massive is getting enough lawyers engaged in business development. So very often what I see is in a firm, it's reliant on a subset of people, quite a small subset, usually partners, not always, but usually. And that's really dangerous. Nobody is indispensable, and people have accidents, people get ill. I was hearing about a firm yesterday that one partner's bringing in most of it, and I was saying to a colleague, well, that's quite dangerous because if something happens to that person or they retire, so you do need more lawyers engaged. And the related danger to that that's happening is that the more junior lawyers aren't being invested in to develop their business development skills. So they don't get used to doing it. So you've got a cyclical problem there. So you do need more lawyers in your firm realizing why they need to contribute. And there's another related problem to that, that a lot of lawyers don't like the idea of sales as they see it, business development, and they didn't come into the law to do this, but actually it is an intrinsic part of the job, and they are one of the best people to sell their services. Obviously, bigger firms have BD people, and they play a really valuable role, especially for big pitches and generating other opportunities. But in mid-sized law firms, typically that as a department doesn't exist. And lawyers are the best place. They've got the great technical expertise, they've got the experience, they've got case studies they can share anonymously with potential clients. So getting more lawyers engaged, realizing why they need to, it's for their own benefit. The more a firm can grow, hopefully the compensation is better for the team. It's more dynamic, hopefully helps to retain lawyers. But that is a big challenge. Many lawyers think, oh, well, I'm technically good, that's enough, but I'm afraid it's not, because so are loads of other lawyers. And what makes you stand out Why would anybody pick you? I think related to that as well is we've got a lot of law firms that are maybe doing marketing. Really important. I've got a marketing background, you heard me say that. But that's no good if the lawyers aren't going out and representing and building on that. So you might get a great mention in a legal directory or other publication, but if that's not supported by people seeing your lawyers in the market, by hearing more from them, getting to know the people who will actually do the work, then that marketing's really not going to really realise its full potential, essentially. So that's quite key. And probably the other big one is the chargeable time issue. Yeah, a lot of law firm leaders don't want people doing less chargeable time. And so then that puts the pressure on. And I think it's realizing that actually, if particularly you've got people that have got a strength for business development activities, and that's going to vary. It's not one size fits all. It's not that we've got everyone writing articles, got everyone going out to events. It's utilizing people's skills well, but there is value in looking at chargeable time and how they spend their other time, and maybe the balance of that to make sure there is time and, importantly, appreciation put on the time spent on business development.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to recap some of your points, we've got the billable hour model makes it difficult to step outside of doing client work. We've got not knowing where to start, therefore not knowing where to spend your time and money. We've got the disconnect between the marketing activities going on and the potential follow-up that would lead to the sales and the new clients. And the third one being a lot of the sales sit with the partnership, therefore the engagement of having those skills or leaning into those skills isn't brought in throughout the team. So it's a big question, but do you have any best practices, even if we maybe pick one of those to dive into, to help overcome those challenges?
I think there's a chain of events that needs to happen, and you won't be surprised to hear this is what I am helping law firms with a lot at the moment. It's making sure there is a vision and strategy, and that is clear and that's communicated, and there's a plan to update that regularly and review the progress on it. Secondly, there's engaging people, making sure we've got lawyers realizing they need to be part of the business development journey and activity, and giving them what that looks like, coming up with an activity plan, and that might be across a whole firm, it might be by department, it depends. I vary that depending on an individual firm, how we approach that, and making sure the lawyers have the skills they need as well. That it's no good. Great, they need to go to networking events and find a certain type of client. We've defined what that client looks like, but then they don't really know how to navigate an event. They're ultimately not going to get much out of it, and they're not going to go. And then another part of that is marketing. Most firms have some marketing, whether it's outsourced or they've got a marketing person, thinking about mid-sized firms, but make sure there's engagement with the marketing. So marketing can often support lawyers a lot, and lawyers can feed back into marketing what they're seeing out in the market as they're talking to their clients and potential clients and other contacts, and make sure there's real communication there, so that the base marketing is made the most of. And then to make sure it's integrated, is there accountability? Are the systems and processes in place? What I said earlier about getting the right people on the bus, looking at, if we want to have a business development culture, are we making sure we are recruiting people who are open to that and prepared to engage with that? And that is tough to do. People often will say yes at interview, even if they don't perhaps really mean it, but it does need to be thought about really carefully. How do you interview? What do you say in your job descriptions? And taking that internally as well. Appraisals, there's business development seen as an important part of the appraisal process. So it's really making sure it's brought into business as usual. That's quite a lot there, but fundamentally there are several ways in which firms can get clients. So there's as you said earlier, Amy, it's making the most of the clients you've got, definitely, which is hopefully concluding the matter to a great standard if it's transactional, and winning it if it's more contentious. So there is that, but there's also how you do that. How do you deal with those clients so they think you're great? Now, the challenge in a lot of legal work, not all, is there's often not repeat work. So it's less like accountancy, where, for instance, things are done annually, a lot of processes and things. That's often not the case at legal. So you want to optimize the chance for client coming back to you if they needed you again, whether that's your department or cross-selling. So that's another thing. How do we cross-sell effectively? And that's about knowing our colleagues well, knowing what they could deliver for our clients trusting us enough, liking the way we work with them, that they come back for that, as well as tell other people to bring referrals to us. And that involves that great initial service and the cross-selling, but staying in touch with clients over time. It's no good completing a matter and then, oh, right, bye, never talk to you again. That's a massive lost opportunity. And that really makes me cry, things like that. And like when you hear of clients going to a different firm for another service, well, then the first firm could have done it, but they just didn't build the relationship enough and look at the opportunities for cross-selling. So that's really important. And then there's building relationships with other potential referrers, intermediaries, that might be accountants, other professional services that could refer, really important, as well as the new clients that you need to attract. So there's lots of best practice there, but should all be looking at how can we bring in people in all those ways, and probably starting with the warm contacts first, because that's always going to be easier. So how can I reconnect with clients? How can I get more referrals? Who do I know in the market? So I know I've just given you an awful lot there to one simple question.
No, that's great. I love particularly about the point going back to hiring the right team and actually making sure that your job descriptions, that your questions align. Even if the conversation, like you said, anyone can say anything in an interview, but actually it sets the right expectation, and actually it might make the person interviewing think different about where their skills lie and actually how they could potentially stand out. So I think that's a great piece of advice, to start at the beginning, get the people on board right from the very beginning. And actually also talking about the skills, I spoke to Scott Simmons about a very similar subject, in that he believes everyone can be a great business developer. It's just actually taking the time to learn those skills. A lot of people are so scared about the sales aspect, but actually, just like any other skill, just like being a lawyer, you have to take the time to learn it. You can't just expect to be great at something that you've never been taught. So I guess that's probably a huge part of the gap, isn't it, really, about just making sure the skills are in place?
Yeah, I think so. Realizing you need to be part of it and then gaining the skills. And you're right, everyone can progress a bit. And maybe every lawyer is not going to be the most amazing BD person, but everyone can progress a bit and improve how they talk to current clients and other contacts. So I think it's completely learnable. I wouldn't have a job if it wasn't. Uh, it's about giving people that confidence, and it can feel hard because why does it feel hard? It's not something you're used to doing, and it feels like you're putting yourself out for potential rejection.
Mm.
And I think lawyers, they hate generally to not know something, and they're fearful that some potential referrer or client that they meet might ask them a ton of questions. Well, probably not. They might ask them some, but they probably won't be that technical either. The key skill there is listening and asking great questions so the person feels valued and engaged with. Certainly in an initial encounter, say an introduction, for example, you've had from somebody, it's an initial conversation, and then you can deepen that later and go and think about what they've answered, what they might want to know more about technically the next time you see them. Or if you're a very junior person, you might need to engage a more senior person from your firm to talk to. But there's lots of things you can do. It's not about you have to know in that moment every single thing. And I think lawyers are fearful of the questions potential clients, other contacts might ask.
That sort of struck a chord with me, actually. Being in marketing, I've also thought about dipping my toe into sales, and perhaps I've always been fearful myself. And you just said that often that's a fear of rejection, and I think that is exactly what it is, isn't it? You don't want someone to have to say no to you. I think that is where the fear stems. And actually, I just want to jump into some of the essential business skills that you feel that lawyers need to adopt or need to work on in order to hit their targets and grow organically? Because I can imagine you were just saying there it's about asking the right questions, being curious. I bet you a lot of lawyers already have the skills they need anyway, just maybe it's about reframing them slightly.
Yeah, maybe. I think they maybe have the skills in another dimension in their life, and they sometimes don't bring them to the workplace. So when people say they're afraid to go and do BD, to go and meet new people, I said, well, what else in your life do you do where you go and put yourself in that situation? And lots of people are parents. They stand outside school gates picking children up and meet new people. They maybe become a school governor and they meet the new people that are also governors and have all those meetings and read all those papers. I'm not one, but I hear it's quite a big job. They might be part of a tennis club and need to go and play matches with different people all the time and have some conversation with them. So it's thinking about, well, what skills do you use there and how do you bring that to a professional environment? Because the worst thing you can do when you first start talking to new people is just start talking about your work. You need to establish a human rapport, a human connection first before you get into that, ideally. I've talked about this a lot when I run workshops on networking skills, is how you conduct that conversation. So just think about, where else do I need to create connection with people and how can I do that more in my work? I was running a workshop last year for a law firm, and I was trying to get them to think about why the how of their service matters so much, which I think a lot of lawyers don't think about. So what I mean by that is, how do I set great expectations for the client, or correct expectations, let's put it that way. How do I communicate with them? How do I contact them ad hoc? What's the framework? Like all those things really. How do I deal with them? And they all looked at me a bit puzzled. So I got each of them to do a really simple exercise. I think about the last time you yourself bought a service from somebody. It could be getting your bike fixed, getting your car fixed, whatever it was, having a carpet fitted. What was good about that service and what was less good, and where it was really good, what's the implication for that and what you will now do? And I remember one particular lawyer giving me a great example of they'd taken their car in and they'd been given an initial quote, but they did a great job and they really updated her, and actually the quote was less in the end, but it wasn't really about the money, it was the updating, and they did an extra small thing for free, I think it was. Anyway, they just did a great job, did it quicker, and therefore she's recommended them another 3 or 4 people to go. So I said, actually, think how service matters for you. That's what your clients need. Even B2B clients want to be served well, and they care about the how you're doing your lawyering, not just the what, not just the outcome. So I think that's quite an easy win to get lawyers to think about, even if they think then not people, they're not extroverts. Actually, it's how can I really think about what this client wants and needs, what's their position. I mean, buying legal services is often a very emotional process. So the Law Firm Marketing Club did a survey, this was from a couple of years ago, this one now, that looked at it, and it is for most people emotional. They're either trying to deal with a problem that can be quite personal in some cases, or trying to avoid a problem. So it's not a fun thing for most clients to do. So if the lawyer can make it easy for them, think about how to deal with them, that really will help. So it's an easy win if you can manage it to help yourself in terms of bringing in more work in the future and your firm.
Yeah, because it's the how, not the what, that makes them feel what they feel, whether that's angry or scared or annoyed or delighted, thankful, grateful, happy. It's that how that does it. Because ultimately, like you said, when you come to a law firm to get a service, you'll probably feel super clueless, you probably feel out of your depth, you probably feel slightly scared, frustrated. And it's how you're then transformed into the end goal, regardless of what that is, how that lawyer supports you. How can someone determine the how? How can someone change and affect the how? What have firms got to think about in order to do that?
I think looking at, where does your business come from? And is much of that repeat clients? And as I said, that's not always possible in legal. For some areas, it definitely is. Where are you getting referrals? Is that working? Or is it coming from new business? And all of them are important, as I said. But if you're not getting many referrals and you're certainly not getting people come back, especially if maybe you've delivered one matter for them and then they come and talk to you about another, but then they don't pick you, that's quite telling if they go to another firm for that. And you might not always be aware of that, but I think trying to look at, have we got a strong referral basis or not, is a good sign as to whether you're doing a good job. I know we moved house nearly 3 years ago now, and our conveyancer was amazing. And you can probably imagine I'm quite a tough client to please. So we had some recommendations from the estate agent, actually, who was very, very good. So I did take them on board. I made a simple price inquiry first off, ruled one out who actually was a solicitor my family had used for a long time. So they felt loyal to that firm. I didn't. I thought, well, I'll look at them. It'll make my mum happy if I look at them. But the price was just way too high for conveyancing, I considered, and definitely much higher than the others. And then the ones that are all similar, I contacted each one, I called each one, and I got a feel for how quickly anybody answered the phone. Didn't have to be the solicitor, whether it was possible to speak to the solicitor. And I know they're busy, they're not going to just speak to potential clients, any minute you want. But actually, a couple of them I did manage to speak to, and they took the time to understand a bit more about what we were doing. It wasn't overly complex. We were selling one house, buying another, pretty standard, really. And then on that basis, I picked, and I did not regret my decision. She was absolutely brilliant, just so efficient, and her assistant mirrored her. She came back in the same way and was very responsive and great communication, always very clear. And you felt like they had our best interests in mind. And I think that's really important. That makes for a difference. And we, as I sort of alluded to, we've used another solicitor for something else recently, and completely the opposite experience. Lots of basic errors. You had to chase them all the time. Bad decision.
Yeah, and first impressions count, don't they? And it took that initial decision making for you to choose, put your eggs in their basket. It'd be interesting to know if that's a culture thing between them, and actually if other lawyers in the same law firm react and service the same way. That'd be quite an interesting experiment,
Yeah,
perhaps. But
I think that raises a really good point, actually, because I'm straying a little bit off piece, but people think when there are problems internally, so I do a lot of working with people, there's not just challenges, but they want to work more productively and positively together internally. They think the clients won't see that. They always spill over. If you've got a negative culture and you've got a bit of a blame culture and people not supporting each other, not feeling positive about their workplace, that is going to show up in front of clients eventually, because mistakes are more likely to happen. Someone might even, I've heard of this before, blame their colleague in front of the client, which is just not on. As a way to manage these things. So getting that right internally is really important, so that people actually feel minded that they want to service clients well, even when the client is probably being a pain sometimes. Because let's face it, that is going to happen. You will get clients probably because they're upset, angry, worried, and not always going to behave in the best way with their solicitor. And it's being able to manage that. But you won't manage that as well with a bad culture.
Very true. And it's about how you deal with and overcome the challenges. That says a lot more.
I think that's right, actually. And that actually, a challenge can be a great opportunity to change a client's view. So totally different market. We did a big house renovation. We had a kitchen worktop supplier, and they'd been great on the phone, everything they'd done. And then when they came to measure, they'd forgotten to tell us the key thing, and we ended up having to move bits of the kitchen. It was going to have a massive impact on the timeline. So I called the manager and said, it's not acceptable. You should have told us this. We've now got to pay for the builder to move, whatever. But they were brilliant. I have to say, they paid for the building work to be done, to move stuff, and they made us worktops in 2 days rather than 9. And that's product that actually had to be produced, and it was perfect when they came. So I cannot rate them highly enough now. So it's stuff can go wrong. It's not saying everything has to be perfect with how you service your clients, but it's then how you deal with that. And so that's in the legal market, that should be applied as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to remember. Don't necessarily, you're not striving for 100% perfection, but you're striving for just putting the client first. Like, we're all human, things can go wrong, but as long as you've put them at the heart of your decision making, then you're most likely going to be on a win. And actually, that leads me to my next point. Yeah, I saw an article that you wrote about how the different business areas impact and work together to allow you to attract new business. I'm very much assuming your service is within that, but can you discuss what business areas firms need to align in order to make sure they can win those new clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So you need that baseline strategy, as we've talked a lot about. Then it's tying up the marketing, business development, and the learning and development. And that
Mm.
can be tricky for mid-sized firms because they often don't have a specific L&D person, might have an HR person who's trying to cover that as well. And almost always don't have a BD person. There is some flex in that, but it's not very common if you're a mid-sized firm that's not yet got a BD culture. I think it shows you've probably got quite a BD culture if you've got a business development person. But it's linking up those three activities, no matter how they're going to happen, for the reasons I said earlier, really. So you've got your baseline strategy, who you're marketing to and what's your message, making sure that's interacting with the fee earners and that they've got the skills to take that out to the marketplace. So it's joining those dots up, which is what I'm helping quite a few firms to think about at the moment. How do we do that? How do we grow? There's a lot of merger and acquisition activity in the legal market at the moment. But there's very definitely a lot of firms who don't want to go that route either way, and they want to grow themselves. And I think there's a massive opportunity because so many firms are clearly surviving because they're still getting work in of some kind, but they're just nowhere near maximising the opportunity they could be of growing it in all the ways that we said earlier. So lots of work to be done.
Yeah, for sure. And perhaps that's part of the challenge is that you talked about how creating the vision and the strategy and just starting from the fundamentals perhaps accentuates the process, makes it slightly longer, slightly more difficult, slightly more challenging than just maybe implementing a few skills or sort of quick wins.
Mm.
But actually what that allows you to do is it's an opportunity to rethink, it's an opportunity to restart, it's an opportunity to ask yourself, is what we're doing the right thing? And I think in a merger acquisition scenario, we've just done our series 3 of Build Better Habits, and our last episode is on merger and acquisition, so I recommend you check that out. But in that situation, it takes a lot of cultural integration for these things to work, have high performing teams, achieve your goals if one of those is organic growth. It's a great opportunity to start there and rethink.
Mm. Yeah, I think so, especially if you would count yourselves as relatively established. That's what you'll have to do. There might be, if you're really small, sort of a micro firm of under 10 people, it might be easier to just brush up some of the skills. I met a law firm, two people from it, in fact, at an event over the summer, both really great people, and particularly one I thought really good at BD in terms of in the networking space, so talking to people and engaging with them and how that person talked about their firm. But then I looked at their LinkedIn profile and it just was half populated. And I
Mm.
thought, oh, that's a 3-hour job. Okay, might need help from someone like me, but it's a relatively short job, but it would so much help you build on your reputation, because if you out networking, people will probably look you up on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn should be working in other ways beyond that as well, which I won't go into right now. But it's what can you brush up? So in some cases there are quick wins, but you're right, in firms that are quite established but have never really developed a business development culture, it is a time to reset. And okay, how do we do things around here from now to develop the business we need and achieve our objectives?
Yeah, absolutely. In the book that you co-authored, Business Development for Women Lawyers, it states that as of 2023, women still only make up 37% of full equality partners in private practice law firms.
Mhm.
And it sort of states that business development success is the key to closing that gap. So what advice would you have for women to help them bridge that gap and succeed in business development? I appreciate this will apply to everybody, but specifically for the women listening, yeah, what advice would you give?
I think there's two main things. There's what I said earlier about think about the skills you use elsewhere, because often women are a little bit more reticent about BD, and typically in law firms there has been business developments focused around golf days, a lot of sport, and I'm not saying no women like sport, lots of women like sport, but lots of women also don't, and there's a gender difference there. So that's not been great. So it's thinking about how, give yourself the confidence you've used these skills elsewhere, and then think about who do you know and what else could you start to do that would be business development focused. So I know of one firm, they've set up a regular ladies event. So I think it's every 3 months, and they might go to a museum, they invite guests, they might go for some drinks, they might do a cocktail making class, something. What is it you can do to get yourself a bit more known? What events could you join? So I went to a new event last week that was for women in financial services and those that service them. Quite a boutique event, quite small, but it meant you got to know people really well. And the idea is that group is to help one another more in work over time. So for people to talk about what they do, we build our connections and hopefully get referrals from one another. So just thinking about, okay, the things that are out there I don't particularly like, maybe they don't fit time-wise, because still women are doing the bulk of family care, more. I won't say it's 90%, I'm sure it's not. I'm not a parent, so I don't know the statistics around that, and I certainly don't have the personal experience, but as I understand it, women are still doing a bit more of that than their other halves. So maybe evenings don't work. What is it that can work for you? What is possible? It is difficult because in the morning, I went to a female lawyer's breakfast last week, which was great. And people did stay the full 2 hours pretty much. So that was great, but it can feel hard in the morning if you want to get on with your work. And equally, leaving at lunchtime when you're maybe midway through something, or maybe you're working from home, and feel difficult. But think about what's possible for you. If there's not something that works for you out there, and there probably is if you're city based for sure, then create it yourself. Build that group yourself. How can you do that?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. It is a lot of golf days, isn't it? Or a lot of attending sports events. But yeah, you're right. It needs women to create the new options. Like, don't stand for whatever's typical or expected. And also, I think importantly, grow a network of women who are there to support you and share those
Yeah,
ideas, and maybe get those ideas off the ground.
yeah.
We have a lot of female leaders upcoming in our podcast episodes, and I made a really conscious effort to look for those and speak to female leaders, because it's easy to not it's easy to go with the crowd, and sometimes that can feel very male heavy. A lot of our episodes already have been male heavy, so sometimes you have to go out of your way to build that network and have that support
Mm.
behind you.
Yeah, I think you do. And I don't go to lots of female only events. I actually prefer mixed events, but I think there's definitely a place for having a strong female network. And I think this might sound a generalization, and I don't want to insult any men, but I went to 4 events last week, and it was quite noticeable. It was always the women that suggested, oh, actually, this person could help me. And if you want to know this, let me know. Here's my email address. So I think there's a bit of a different attitude to BD. And hopefully that's reassuring for women, because I'm not saying women should only go out and network with women. That's not a very good idea, but hopefully gives you confidence. And overall, we're going out and building a network. I think what is it? I've been networking 13 years. I've only had 2 more negative experiences with people I've encountered. So actually, it's, well, what can I do? Where can I go that I'm going to hopefully enjoy it a bit? Because if you enjoy it, you'll get more from it.
Yeah, definitely. In the chapter of that book, you talk about networking effectively at events. That's what you share in the book. What skills are needed to network effectively? What do people need to be considering?
Firstly, think about where are you going and why are you going there. So
It's a good
um,
start.
yeah, I mean, it's not just the people in the room. You always have to think about who do the people in the room know. There's a network beyond them. But broadly, I don't typically go to lots of local groups because they're much, much smaller businesses. They're never going to have any training budget. There's a lot of tradespeople there. Again, they just don't need my help. So I'm probably not going to go there. They're often nice groups, but they're not the best use of my time. So think about where are you going? Who do you want to meet? So prepare, think about what you're going to say about yourself. And I'm a lawyer is not a good option. If you want to know more about what you should say, you can contact me. But I'm a lawyer is not good for lots of reasons. Think about when you come in the room, what impact are you having? You know, are you the sort of person people glance at you and think, oh, I wouldn't mind talking to that person, like to talk to that person, rather than, oh no, I hope that person doesn't come near me. And that doesn't sound very nice. That sounds judgmental. We've all had that happen. Yeah, we've seen someone's behavior or whatever and hope they don't come and talk to us at an event. Joining groups, making sure we join a group where there's clearly an open space for us, so reading the body language right. Thinking about how do we speak to people, the stages of conversation, and as I said earlier, not starting with work stuff, building some human rapport, connection, and hopefully getting them to talk about their work first, so you can then position what you say about yours. If it's another lawyer, you're going to probably talk differently to if it's a non-lawyer. Then when you get to your point to talk, saying what I said earlier, not I'm a lawyer, but explaining that in another way, and then finishing the conversation. And if there's a what next, then there should ideally be a minimum what next of connect on LinkedIn, and then make sure you obviously got the person's details and what we're going to do. Are we going to have another meeting? Are you going to send an article you sent? But making sure you follow up, and you're never going to stay in touch with everybody you meet at networking or other events, but the ones you are, have a bit of a plan and be in touch with them regularly. And the great thing about events, whether you're starting them yourself, going to other people's, is the more people you know, the more you get to invited to unpublicized events. And by the nature of being invited to those, you're already seen as more trusted, such as the event I got invited to last week at the private bank. That one was just people invited, people they knew who thought would be a good connection for the others in the room. But that only happens once you've built up a network and have been out and about a bit, and try different things. What works for you? Don't make yourself go to something you hate. I mean, I like events where I just go in a room and network the room. I'm going to one this evening with lawyers, but other people don't like that. They'd rather go where there's a talk, and then that gives you something to talk about with the other people. Psychologically feels easier. So just think about where you're going, who you want to meet, how you manage yourself in the room. There's loads more detail in the book and probably on my website as well about those stages to think about when you're actually there. And then the big important thing, follow up. So many people don't, or they follow up once and forget about it.
I think also, and what I've found from attending events is taking the pressure off yourself that every person you speak to has to be whatever your goal wants to be, whether that's to book them for content or make a sale, because also you never know what might happen down the line. Like you said, it's about building that larger network. You might speak to someone that at the time you feel, okay, they were lovely, but have no relevance to me. But 6 months down the line, for whatever reason, those things come back around. And the bigger you build that, the bigger your sort of trust circle is, the bigger that network is. You never know what might be around the corner.
Yeah, that's happened to me so many times, both from people that I didn't expect to get work from or a referral from even. And then others, I remember a client years ago, I worked with her individually. She's in banking, so she's not a lawyer. And she was referred to me by a colleague because I was better placed to help her with the challenge she had. And that went really well. She had a good outcome. And I stayed in touch with her just because I liked her. We built rapport and I genuinely cared to find out how her career progressed. And then one January, I just dropped her a LinkedIn message along those lines to check how she was. And just, oh, if you knew anyone that does work on managing, developing people. I said, yeah, me. What do you? Because in her head, I'm the person she worked with individually, and I do that, but I also do lots of other things as well. And so I ended up running something for her leadership team. She's in finance. And then after that, it led to me helping her establish a whole mentoring program in her department. And I worked, they've since had a restructure and that's all on hold at the moment. But I think for a year and a half, we established 2 cohorts. I went in every quarter to help them move that forward. And it worked really well. We saw some brilliant results. But all of that came from me just, as you say, staying in touch, nice person, we've done some good work together, didn't expect anything else. So it just shows you.
Oh, that's perfect. I mean, to be honest, me and you met through a recommendation of somebody else, and we've kept in
Yes.
touch ever since. And I
Yeah.
think also that comes from just asking questions. Like, don't be afraid to ask the question of somebody, do you know a good person for this, or do you know someone from that? Like, lean on your network because you never know who
Yeah.
you're then going to get introduced to and how that might build.
Yeah, and how you can then help your clients. That's an important one for lawyers, actually, that to be a trusted advisor, so they talk to you about a range of issues, and hopefully your firm can help with many, but you might need to bring in other professionals. And if they feel you're well networked and can give them good referrals for that, that's a way to give great client service and help you build rapport with contacts in the market as well, because you're referring them
Mm.
in when they can be helpful to your clients. So really, a network is invaluable. A friend of mine, she had very big banking jobs. She moved essentially bank to bank, all the big ones, because usually a boss left, moved on, and or another person, and 6 months later said, "Will you come and join me?" And then she got to the point in one organisation, she was really senior. Politics kicked in, the work declined, they weren't going to make her redundant, so she effectively just had to leave. She really got pushed out because I don't think she saw the politics coming. She's very good at her job, but I think that probably wasn't her strength. And so when we sat down just to have a friendly chat, I had to put my friend with a bit of work hat on as we sat and had a coffee. So, well, what about your network? And she, what network? And she just never built one. She hadn't stayed in touch with any of those people at those big banks throughout time. And she said to me, I said, I'm going to use this line in the future. She said, I'll never do that again. I'm going to build a network from now on. And she's done a really good job. She now works in fintech. And she's always, she lives in Manchester now, but she's always coming down to London and meeting people, and has really worked hard at that. So that was a big lesson, because you can't build a network when you need one. And I think that point we had earlier about junior lawyers not being involved in BD, assuming they progress from a technical perspective and their experience, the problem is if they've not got into that BD, they've then got to start. And some firms will promote them based on their technical experience, but then the lawyers still got a problem themselves, that they're having to suddenly bring in work when they didn't before and they don't know how, or they don't get promoted because they don't have that skill. So there's a whole chicken and egg piece there. So that's why the sooner you can start to get into doing BD activities, networking being just one of them, the better, because you can't build that network and contacts when you need them.
Yeah, you can't turn on the lead sales tap, can you? And it's the same
No.
with networking. It takes years and months of that relationship building. And one of the things in the chapter as well is you talk about having a network strategy, which could feel slightly overwhelming, but what do you think one or two important things that firms should be outlining in their network strategy?
Yeah, I think this is going to be by department, I would say. So you've got the big overall firm strategy, what do we want to be achieving? And then that needs to be translated into department level. So really, what sort of clients are we seeking? What sort of work are we looking for? Usually higher revenue, higher profit work. And where do we find those people? And that should inform the networking strategy. So where are we going to find people that are like that or could refer us in that way? And sometimes that might be other lawyers.
Mm.
Lots of lawyers pass on work if either there's conflict of interest or it's not their specialism. So that's worth thinking about too. There's one networking group I used to be a member of. I'm not this year, but I did like it. I thought it was good. 50% of the members were lawyers, and they genuinely passed leads and work between them. But that links to the cross-selling point. Even though we're talking about across firms rather than within firm, nobody's going to refer you if they don't think you're going to do a great job for their valuable client. And that
Mm.
applies internally and externally. So building your reputation is really important. I say this a lot when I talk to people about, people need to know you, need to like you, and they need to professionally trust you. And I am very careful whenever I refer anybody to one of my clients, especially if I've never actually seen them deliver work. I say that. So I say, I know this person, I like them as a person, but just to be clear, but
Mm.
ideally, to build up that professional trust, people know a bit more about your work, so they feel very willing to refer you forward.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of that comes into under promising and over delivering in many cases, because that's then how you build that reputation and that service. It goes back to your example of your kitchen countertop situation where even though it went wrong, they still, they over delivered in sorting out that challenge. And if the service that you're known for isn't up to scratch, not only are you not going to be able to win direct business off that, but nobody's going to trust you in order to refer you. It has such a knock-on effect, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does have a massive knock-on effect. So to think about that and how can you build your reputation for what you're like to work with, as well as the actual work, is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've just launched, just to finish our conversation, your Business Development Accelerator Program, which is a program to help lawyers drive growth at their firm. The program has 3 phases. The last phase is maintaining momentum. We sort of touched on that in the follow-ups earlier. What are your best practices for ensuring and maintaining a business development culture in your firm and maintaining that momentum?
Accountability is really important, making sure that exists. So that means that there is actually accountability as a department. What activities are we doing, that we actually feed back to one another, what's worked, what we found's good, so that we can share knowledge about things, as well as feel like people care whether we're doing BD or not. So that's really vital. And I'd say the other thing is reviewing the strategy, updating the team, looking at the impact on marketing and making sure that's communicated. Any new initiatives, that's widely communicated. It's not just kept within the partnership. And I think the third big one is to make sure that any new people that come on board, make sure they get a good induction as part of it, the BD and what we do here. And probably not week 1, but certainly month 2, 3, that we'd expect you to be getting involved in this, and this is how we can support you to do that, because we've got to carry that on to keep it going. It's unfortunately, it's never a job that's done. It is a continual, and sometimes if there's tough times in the market, doing BD is the last thing you feel like doing, but it's the time you most need to do it. And if you've got a lot of good contacts and you're used to doing BD anyway, it'd be a lot easier to continue rather than having to start. So I do some work with another firm, totally different sector, still professional services, but not a law firm. And they've had work rolling in quite nicely for a while, and they're now in some issues with that. It's stopped, and I don't think there's any particular reason why, but the pipeline's declined. And so of course it doesn't feel motivating where people aren't used to doing BD as much as I've been trying to get them to do BD. So I've now given them a very specific plan for hopefully some quicker wins. Won't be immediate, but in the next month, so that up until Christmas they can hopefully see some work coming in for late in the year and early next year. But in the medium term, we need to get back on to working on the strategy we're working on to go to the market with something really solid and get people working on BD. And whilst it's not good this phase for them, I think in a way it might be good for showing them that more than just the owner of the business needs to be doing the BD. I think it could have that benefit in this time, as hard as it is for them right now. So it needs to be consistent activity. And people say to me, how did you build your business? Really on building my network. I'm too old and too busy to do it now, but when I started my business, I'd network 5 times a week, every week. And most of my work now comes through referrals, some networking I still do, and speaking. Speaking is another business development activity. It is genuinely a part, it's a service I offer, but it can, in some instances, and particularly for lawyers, could be a business development activity. But again, you won't get lots of lawyers who would love to speak.
Yeah, I love your point about sharing successes in terms of what's working for different departments. I think that's often something that law firms, probably businesses, don't do generally. I remember talking to Kirsty Papin in her episode about tech. So they talk about, Kirsty talks about how one department might try a piece of tech, it works really well, but didn't share it with the rest of the team or departments of how that works really well. And I think it's the same with business development, like what event worked really well, what tactic worked really well, what question worked really well. I think it's so important. We sort of forget to share the successes. Often we probably share things that don't work so well.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the human brain is wired to share more negative things, but we do need to do more of that. And even though clients differ between law firm departments, we're all still people. So it's okay, well, that tactic that behaviour worked well for that department. What could be my version of that? You might need to modify it, but absolutely. More sharing does need to happen. Yeah, I see even in smaller firms that sharing doesn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also your point about momentum, in that when you get to a position where things have dried up and things have gone slow, that's when the stress kicks in, that's when the desperation happens, that's when you don't think straight, that's when you're looking for the quick wins that maybe stray from your initial vision or your initial
Yeah.
values that you have. And that's where you become unstuck and you're in sticky situations, and maybe you're over promising to get those sales through the door. So actually that just ends up having a knock-on effect. So having that foundation and that momentum in the beginning hopefully avoids that scenario happening.
Yeah, yeah, very important to get it grounded so it's just something you're used to doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Joanna, for joining me today. It was a great session
Pleasure.
that can help law firms hit their targets of growing organically over the next 5 years. We will leave all the links below of Joanna's Business Development Accelerator program, her website, where you can find her and contact her to find out more information. But thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks a lot, Amy. Bye.